Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV 18 special on Wing Commander Abhinandan's return to India 2 days after he was captured by the Pakistan Army. Now, the Indian Air Force pilot has returned to India. He crossed over from the Wagah border at around 9:30 p.m. last night. On the diplomatic front, External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj attended the Council of Foreign Ministers of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. India had been invited to the event as a guest of honor. Addressing the Council's inaugural session, Sushma Swaraj stressed on the need to build pressure on the countries that support terror outfits. Without naming Pakistan, she urged the OIC to tell such states to dismantle terror infrastructure, stop providing funding to terror groups. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has skipped the OIC event after the UAE refused to drop the invite to India. Addressing the joint session of the Pakistan Parliament, Qureshi said, and I quote, "I will not attend Council of Foreign Ministers as a matter of principle for them having an extended invitation as a guest of honor to Sushma Swaraj." End quote. Now, staying with the statements from Pakistan's Foreign Minister, in an interaction with CNN, Shah Mahmood Qureshi admitted that Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar, who has been accused of by India of masterminding several terror attacks in the country, is in fact in Pakistan. However, Qureshi added that for Pakistani authorities to arrest Azhar, India would first have to hand over proof that is acceptable in Pakistani courts. As part of our comprehensive coverage, my colleague Shireen Bhan spoke to a host of experts to get their take on the expatriation. Listen in.
The Indian government saying that, look, let's keep this off public and the media. Let Wing Commander Abhinandan be repatriated and let's do this without the glare of cameras.
Yes, I would completely agree with that. But I would, it would have been more appropriate if the Pakistani government had accepted if there was such an offer and accepted an offer from Indian government to fly him out directly, for the reasons that it's possible that after the ejection, Wing Commander Abhinandan would have suffered certain amount of injuries, particularly spinal and foot injuries, and therefore it's not correct to expose him to further stress by way of travel, and an airlift from there to Delhi would have been the best thing to do. Notwithstanding whatever the decisions that have been made, if he is coming across Wagah, then there is absolutely no need of a public spectacle. He's a serving officer, he's in uniform, and he must come across and ferried to Delhi. So I think this is the correct step to take. There is no need to make a public spectacle out of it.
Let me take that point across to Praveen Swamy. Praveen, the question that I was asking, do you believe that this is the right approach? The Indian government believes, let's not make this into a public spectacle, a media spectacle, and let's quash the narrative of this being an act of generosity on the part of Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, because this is only the first step that is expected of Pakistan to deliver on the promises that it has made.
Absolutely. I think if you look at the slightly bigger picture here, this offered Pakistan a fortuitous, a lucky off-ramp, if you like, a way to get off this escalation highway, which had set in after its attempts to hit at Indian air bases yesterday. Now, essentially, Pakistan thought that by raising the ante to by a massive level, by going for Indian military targets, it would succeed in establishing the robustness of its deterrence. It would signal to India that, look, even if you pursue terrorists across the border, we're willing to go to war, we're even willing to go close to the nuclear threshold. But what followed after that extremely irresponsible course of action was intense diplomatic activity behind the scenes. I think Pakistan was told quite bluntly by both the United States and by its allies in West Asia that it needed to get off this road. And returning a prisoner of war, which normally happens at the end of a military crisis, was a signal from them that they're done with this particular chapter. The important thing, though, is that it still doesn't solve India's concerns. India didn't just strike at this terror training camp to kill terrorists. If anything, that was a peripheral objective. It was intended to make a point about India's deep anger at the way events were playing out. And I think India will be seeking guarantees from Prime Minister Imran Khan that the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the Lashkar-e-Taiba, other jihadist groups operating in Pakistan will be reined in. Now, what kinds of promises will be credible in India? After all, we've been here before. What kinds of promises will be credible remains to be seen, and that will be the stuff of diplomacy in coming days.
Yeah, you know, speaking of next steps now, and I want to talk a little bit about the CNN interview, Christian Amanpour interviewing the Pakistan Foreign Affairs Minister. And Swamy, I want you to comment on that, because we were just talking about Pakistan's inability previously to come good on the assurances that it's made with respect to the JEM. When being asked, is Masood Azhar in Pakistan, the Foreign Affairs Minister of Pakistan says Masood Azhar is in Pakistan, and to my knowledge, he's very unwell, and is unwell to an extent that he cannot leave his house. On the question of arresting him, he says that India needs to give us evidence that is acceptable in the courts of Pakistan. After all, we will have to justify in the courts of Pakistan. So if they have unalienable evidence, share it with us. I mean, you know, you've got to take this with a little bit of a pinch of salt. There is not just evidence that India has provided, but the rest of the world has provided ample evidence against Masood Azhar.
You know, quite frankly, Shireen, I mean, these remarks are laughable. Forget India's voluminous evidence. Yes. Forget the evidence that led the United Nations Security Council to proscribe the Jaish. Forget what the Americans, what provoked the Americans to blacklist Masood Azhar. We can look at the words of Lieutenant General Javed Qazi, the former ISI chief, in Pakistan's own Senate after 2002, where he stood up in the Senate and on the floor of the House said that the Jaish-e-Mohammed was responsible for the killing of innocent Kashmiris, was responsible for the killing of Daniel Pearl, the journalist, and was responsible for attacks within Pakistan on General Musharraf itself. Now, a minister of the Pakistan government, a former ISI chief, says this. I cannot understand what more evidence Pakistan wants.
You know, let's talk about the role that the US is playing in all of this, and the other actors as well, even though India maintaining that there is no third-party involvement.
Shireen, I think that we are seeing two things. One, an unprecedented international support for India. India's patience has been respected. India's right of counter-terror strikes has been recognized. I have, in my long diplomatic career, never seen such overwhelming international support. That is one. Two, India and US relations have come a very long way. I mean, we all remember 1971 when President Nixon was threatening India with USS Enterprise. And fast forward to 2019, when Secretary of State issues a statement, Pompeo, to say that, to refer to India's counter-terrorism measures, refer to India-US security partnership, defense partnership, to underline the fact that India and the US are responsible for peace and security in the region. Very significant, Shireen. India and US are responsible for peace and security. And then goes on to call on the Pakistani side to take action against the terror camps. So, and the frequency with which NSA John Bolton and our side have spoken, Secretary of State Pompeo and our side have spoken, I am, my own assessment is that there is a close coordination, and I won't be surprised, as I've said on your channel also earlier, if we find that eventually we find that there was very close coordination when India carried out the counter-terror strikes against the camps. And not just the US, Shireen. In fact, I think that countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like UAE, and even China played a role here to quietly tell, privately tell Pakistan to see the writing on the wall.
And despite diplomacy prevailing, skirmishes were still being reported from the line of control. Shireen also spoke with VP Malik, retired Chief of Army Staff, as well as S. Krishnaswamy, retired Air Chief Marshal, to get their take on where India goes from here going forward.
General Malik and Air Marshal Krishnaswamy, let me come to you now. I understand that diplomatically, while the wheels are turning and with this development, there seems to be a degree of de-escalation in tensions. But, you know, ceasefire violations continue along the line of control, so the radars will continue to churn.
Yes, that's true. You know, we must remember our conflict with Pakistan today is on is counter-terrorism, is against the terrorism which is being utilized from their land to harm us, and that is the primary objective, and that is the primary aim, which, as I think everybody agrees, has not been achieved by just one strike. So we have to be prepared for the long haul. The other thing, while generally I agree with all my panelists, I think there is a need to also not overplay the diplomatic card as well as the nuclear part. Now, the diplomatic card is absolutely essential, and I don't wish to undermine it. But last so many decades, we have done our best, and it has not made any difference. We are slightly in a better position, and we hope that the international community will continue to support us. And yet, I feel that when it comes to a strike from our side, when it becomes necessary, because these people will continue to use their cheapest weapon that they have got in terms of terrorist activity. So this will continue, and therefore I do not wish to undermine the military part which you have just now mentioned. And that is exactly what was indicated by our 3 soldiers who gave the briefing. As far as the nuclear aspect is concerned, again, I think, yes, they have the nuclear weapons, but let's not overplay that. I don't believe that as soon as we cross the line of control, unless we go and do a heavy damage in their country, I don't believe that they will be able to use it. In any case, they all know that if they try to use it or if they do use it, they will get a very heavy dose from us. So I have always believed that there is certain space. That is the space in which we have utilized our airstrike against their terrorist camp. And we have also showed our resolve. And that is what I was saying, that the political authorities is now prepared to take slightly greater risk than it had taken in the past. So let's not overplay this nuclear bit and all.
There is also the fear that politicians from all sides will try and use this to ratchet up their domestic constituencies as well. This is an election year. What would you advise going forward?
Look, I think even while we welcome and we are very happy that Wing Commander Abhinandan has come back to us, there is no need for us to go into euphoria. It's part of the fight which is continuing against terrorism, once again I emphasize, and there is absolutely no need to go into jingoism. Also, I would suggest that we should not politicize the national security issue, in this case a more sensitive issue, because the conflict is still on, as I believe. As you said yourself, the firing is continuing along the line of control even today. So my appeal to all the political parties, in fact the rest of India, would be that let's not politicize whatever activity, military activity or diplomatic activity which is going on, and let us put across a very united front as a nation. And that can only be done if the political parties come to this agreement that national security is far more important and well ahead of politics, notwithstanding the coming elections.
Absolutely. Chief Marshal Krishnaswamy, your comments on that, sir?
I want to say something slightly different, otherwise it gets very boring. You are, after all, it's a business channel.
Go ahead.
The interesting part is the Pakistani army runs the greatest business of Pakistan. I think you should explore a bit on that. They don't want to let go of power, not because they want to kill, want to shoot Indians. They want to stay in power because of money. They have their hand on every pie. Right from what you call real estate to businesses and you name it all, they don't pay any income tax. They get a chunk of land, houses, or whatever it is whenever they want, and they have a fleet of cars. They run buses. I think they even run airlines. What all? I think we need to now hit at their military business, really. we need to explore what are they up to, what are they hanging on in power for. After all, they pretend to be a democracy, they are not. Why are they hanging on to power? Is money. Everywhere it's about money. Okay, so as long as they'll keep hitting us. That's their interest. And they will always find some bogey to hit, bash India, because that will keep their business going. And they want to keep hitting Kashmir, because in Kashmir, that's another business. We'll have to look at that. I suggest you, as a business channel, I think you should explore what kind of a business their Pakistani army is doing. And it should come out, really. I think we should just publicize it, the balance sheet or whatever it is, and we will compare that to Ambani's here or whichever company that you want to, how great a business the Pakistani army is doing. Leave the guns out of this, That will make it more interesting, really.
Leave the guns out of it. Bring out the... No, I completely agree with you. Let's bring out the balance sheet of the Pakistan Army. And I think that's a great idea that you bring to the table, because really, at the end of the day, and as we made very clear, that it's not going to be a decision that Imran Khan will take. General Bajwa and the army headquarters will have to sign off on the engagement that they want to take forward.
Shireen Bhan also spoke with former defense personnel to delve into the mindset of the wing commander when he was captured by the Pakistan Army. Let's hear out what they had to say.
Let me bring the three defense personnel that I have on the program into this conversation. And let me first go across to Air Chief Marshal Krishnaswamy, sir. Air Chief Marshal Tipnis called me the Air Force brat, and I'm very proud to be one. In terms of next steps, and again for the benefit of our viewers, because so much of this has been videos that people have seen on social media commenting on the courage that Wing Commander Abhinandan has shown, defense under fire, defiance under fire, the way that he undertook the escape and evasion strategy on ejection. What do you believe trains an Indian Air Force pilot to be able to be this courage under fire that we saw being exemplified by Wing Commander Abhinandan?
It's the motivation. Just simple, underline, you don't have to be exceptional, but you have to be motivated enough to, improve yourself, to get into it's somewhat it's competing as well. So you have to be on your toes all the time. You must get into aeroplane. You must fly as much as you can and you want to, and you want to excel. You want to get better scores, better marks, better and everything as possible. And you have to sustain. That requires a fair amount of so-called energy, focus, concentration, etc., that you're very familiar with. So he's proved himself to be actually very remarkable in all. He proved, at the end of it, what is our objective as a fighter pilot? He has really excelled. He's the first MiG-21 pilot to bring down an F-16. And I quite well understand how difficult it is, and it's not a fluke, and we will get to know more about the combat later. That's not important right now, and he's proved himself to be remarkable. That's what our our bread and butter is. And having said that, and that was and plus he's the flight commander of the squadron, so he has to set an example. That's always there, obviously, in back of his mind, that whatever he does, and whatever the squadron stands for, the squadron so-called hierarchy stops at flight commander of the sea at the most, and so he's everything. So all the youngsters whom he's training, they are looking up to him. So and all his men, the hundreds of men who kind of look after his plane and others. And then the other squadrons, the whole, that what a station is like. So he has to he has to prove himself, or what do you call it? All the others, all are hearing and watching, not so much what he says, but how he is, and what message that he kind of conveys. So he has to be exemplary, so-called, as an example. Whether he is tackling what he call the villages there, or whether he is burning up the papers, or how he handles himself, how he speaks, he's so aware of it, and it's remarkable. And to sustain that energy is something extraordinary. So I put him as that.
Well, Emma Shultyagi is here with me in the studio. I would imagine that there's a big Bada Khana being planned on his return, Emma Shultyagi. But, the point that I want to raise today, and I think this is something that we've been talking about over the last 24 hours or so, the use of air power. And many of the Air Force personnel who've been on my shows say that perhaps one of the larger messages from what has happened in this operation is that the notion that air power was automatically escalatory is no longer the case. So this is now an instrument that can be exercised.
Very true. But first of all, let me talk about Bada Khana. Bada Khana is not only in his honor, I think whole country is celebrating.
Absolutely.
And, there are Bada Khanas at every place. And I saw some visuals where people are standing to greet him. And I'm sure when they return home, there will be Bada Khana.
There will be Bada Khanas all across India. But for the benefit of our viewers who might not be familiar with what a Bada Khana is, Emma Shultyagi, you want to fill them in with that?
No, I think you need to do it because I have attended so many of these, but it is generally a big meal.
It is a big meal, and it is a get together across ranks and across hierarchies. That is really the spirit of the Indian Armed Forces, not just the Indian Air Force, but the Indian Armed Forces. And we'll get General Malik to comment on that in just a second. But the larger point that you were making, sir.
Yes. So now coming to the bogey of escalation, and there were two issues which prevented. First of all, there has to be a political will to send the Air Force across. And the two issues which always play on one's mind, one is escalation, and the second one was the nuclear bogey. Now, in this strike, what has happened, that the escalatory nature, you see, the escalatory nature of war is there when you do not declare your intent clearly.
Right.
Now, when you have a strike, and which is with a limited, which is set objective, and you don't deviate from that, we also under provocation, then that means you can control escalation. And escalation control is always with the stronger party.
Right.
So in this case, what has been demonstrated, that we'll strike what we want to strike and with a purpose, and do nothing more than that unless you provoke us.
Yeah.
So I think this myth has been demolished forever.
And that's all we have on the show this evening. Many thanks for watching, but do stay tuned to CNBC TV 18. Lots more news and updates through the day.